Well, Whānau, I am very excited to be talking to the bro here this afternoon, or this morning, really. I have to admit, this kaupapa, I am a little bit behind the ball on, which is a big reason why I wanted to have a kōrero, well, one of the kaupapa, I should say, that we'll eventually be speaking about, of course. So, kia ora, my brother, could you please just introduce yourself quickly for our whānau listening and watching?
Kia ora e te whānau, ko Zane tuku ingoa. Ko Ngāti Puki au toku iwi. Aye.
Ka whai, bro. So, very, very basic start off. Where are you from, bro? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? All that sort of stuff.
So, brother, child of South Auckland. My whole life, still here. Just grew up around, went to Aotearoa College and grew up around Māori my whole life. So, yeah, South Auckland to the bone.
Mean, bro. Let's talk about that because South Auckland has all sorts of connotations and kind of negative stigmas and stuff like that attached to it. But every person I speak to, bro, is super, super proud to be from there. So it can't all be that bad.
Oh, yeah, bro. Like, by the melting pot of South Auckland is something that you have to experience. It's definitely the biggest blessing for me in my life is to just grow up around culture and to stay connected with that culture, and not just te ao Māori, but tangata ole moana, like my Pacific peoples. Just growing up around them, it differentiates you from a large proportion of especially tamaki makaurau culture, and so therein you just become very proud to have that understanding of the tangata that you're surrounded by.
I think that's a big thing too, bro. Like coming from a smaller place, a regional town. I'm based in Taranaki in New Plymouth, and it's a big thing that I always notice is a lot of when I catch up with Auckland whānau and friends, they're a lot more worldly, even if they haven't traveled. They're a lot more aware that it's more than just New Zealand that exists in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, growing up in South Auckland, it's a struggle you all go through together, and that familiarity with that struggle of what, to be even just deemed a South Aucklander sometimes can be marginalizing for you. So everyone understands that is in this area. And so, that just draws you all closer together. But no matter where I've been around the world, like I just carry Southside with me. I'm real proud to be able to do that.
Mean, bro, what besides being, I guess, more in tune with the world or open to the happenings of the world globally and the lessons that they brought you, what else has it taught you coming from that community? Because
in relation to the kaupapa, by in particular, so by South Auckland is the least covered area with rākau in New Zealand. And when you grow up in an area like this, just like I did, I had no real connection to nature. It wasn't until I ended up getting expelled from school and became an arborist that I started to realize like how little nature we are surrounded by in South Auckland. So to give you just like an idea, Māngere and Ōtāhuhu in particular, we have 8% tree coverage in Māngere and Ōtāhuhu. And if you compare that to somewhere like Remuera sits around the 20% mark. And so when you grow up in South Auckland, like you're growing up in that concrete jungle, even more so for the tamariki who grew up there now. And that's something that I'm like really aware of, is how hard it is to get tamariki of South Auckland to connect with nature, even though by and large, like our cultures are made up of, large percentile Māori, large percentile tangata Pacifica, and those cultures innately should be connected to nature. Like we have this kind of connection just because of our culture. To have that inside us, but it's not around us. And so that's one of the big things that I fight for, is for people within our communities to kind of like realize that, hey, man, they're doing this to us intentionally. We're getting placed in these concrete jungles with no connection to the stuff that is most important to us, like nature, tangata whenua. I am a person of this land. Rākau is connected to that. And that's where the kaupapa becomes really meaningful to me, to ensure that large trees are still in the areas like Māngere and Avondale and these like lower decile areas, for want of a better term.
So let's talk more about that then, bro. What is the what are the importance? I mean, you try to touch on it, but it is real hard to define, right? Like that innate relational element that tangata whenua have to te tai ao and all those places. Can you dive into that a bit? I guess what you think, what you believe.
So the thing is, you know, I understand that is not the way that it is for everybody. Like, not every single Māori is just going to have this innate connection to tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori, but that's how it was for me. And I know if it's like that for me, then there's other tamariki within South Auckland that will have that same thing. And that connection, it saved me. Like, I was bumming around in South Auckland just being your normal kind of like not having a life kid. And it wasn't until I found arboriculture and ngā rākau that I actually found a way out. And even though I still live in Māngere and I'm always be proud of South Auckland, I'm just talking about being impoverished in that way. And it was that connection to nature that I was instantly like, this speaks to my culture. It speaks to who I am. And there are just so many other people that are like that within these communities that unless they have ngā rākau growing around them, they will never be able to find that in a way that I was really, really lucky to be able to. But it's the pūrākau, so the stories that are connected to ngā rākau, to the trees, that really got me. And one in particular is one of the ones that was, so Tāmaki Makaurau, we just have not a lot of trees, and they've been getting removed at a wicked rate since 2012. And at Canal Road, where this protest began, was the last two maere in Tāmaki Makaurau. They'll probably be the last two maere left from Tāmaki Makaurau to Cape Reinga. And that there is a story behind that tree. Tāne Mahuta, when he separated Papatuanuku and Ranginui, he placed maere at the crotch of Ranginui to stop them from joining. And so there is mātauranga connected to that. Maere is the slowest growing tree. It's the hardest wood. It's that way because it holds up Ranginui. And when I went to Canal Road, I went there to not just protect that living 100-year-old maere, the last one left in Tāmaki Makaurau, but to protect that pūrākau, so I could take my tauira to a place like that and be able to teach them that. And that exists for all native rākau. There is a story like that for the Kauri, for the Pohutukawa, and it's really important to me. That was in Avondale. Avondale is incredibly similar to South Auckland. Low tree coverage, and they had this small taonga there that had the maere, that has the kāwaka, some of the last ones left in Auckland. They hold this mātauranga. I'm able to teach it there, and so it was so imperative that we kind of defended that area. In 2021, there are no protections for trees in Auckland, stands of trees like that, and that's wrong. And that's where a whole bunch, not just because of mātauranga Māori and the connections to that, but because these are 100, 200, 700-year-old living entities that deserve to be protected. Kei te marama?
Hi, bro. I'm so blessed to be having this kōrero with you, because I'm getting binded into the importance. I mean, I knew the importance, but understanding, I mean, I'm obviously not there, bro. I'm down here in Taranaki. So that is the big thing for me. I definitely want to advocate, and I definitely want to tautoko, but understanding what's actually going on is important before I do that. And that was a big reason for wanting to speak with you too, because I want to get on the waka, but I'm not going to get on the waka until I have a full scope of kind of what is actually happening on the ground.
I totally understand that. And so, you know, one of the big things in this space is that I understand not every tree has the same amount of reverence behind it. So when you design a framework to protect these living entities, you know, that you have to take into account all the different things. Yes, we definitely need houses, and sometimes trees have to be removed for houses, but do we have to remove taonga? Do we have to remove these, like the last of their kind, hundreds of years old, that allow us to delve into a world that was almost lost to New Zealand? These pūrākau that I understand, they're so important for me to teach to, like, my tauira that come from South Auckland, that just don't, brother, like, I've never stepped foot on my marae. It's something that I long to do, but there is a disconnection for urban Māori that some people just don't quite understand. And we long to have that connection to Te Ao Māori. And Canal Road in particular was the place that I could share those things with young students from within South Auckland, Avondale. They deserve that. And this small grove of trees, they're actually building a kāinga order just across the road. So this grove of trees that we were trying to protect for those children who will grow up in kāinga order and have those same things that I didn't have. Like, they weren't there. Now there's no trees for them to draw that connection to nature. In those trees, one of the things, you know, if a person kills a kērero in the bush, everyone's up in arms. But these trees house generations and generations and generations of kērero that should fly amongst the housing of kāinga order, so that the tamariki can see those. And I know it's like a romantic idea and stuff like that, but it's actually really tangible. It's real. If people get to grow up listening to the tui rather than the chainsaw, they're going to have a much better connection with nature.
You mentioned a lot these pūrākau, and bro, that you're protecting the pūrākau and the Paki Waitara and things of the stories within the trees. How did you come to know those stories, or who taught you, or how did that come to be?
I just research, you know. But my nephew is named Maire, and his father, he's an artist, quite a prolific New Zealand artist, actually. And that's where I learned that story, you know, the story of Cody and Tohora, you know, the connection, how Cody and the whale are brothers, and the whale coated Cody in his skin before it went into the ocean. And, you know, then you talk about, when you tell these pūrākau, these are not myths to me. There is actually, you know, like for me, this is like history, knowledge, like, but, you know, it's actually proven that, like, whales were on Earth at one point and returned back to the ocean. And that is a story, like, that's, you know, scientifically proven, but that is a story that has existed within Te Ao Māori forever.
Yeah.
Forever. We've known these things, this mātauranga Māori, you know, and now in 2021, we're able to use, like, momona o ngā tohora, so the fat of whales, to help treat Cody dieback. This mātauranga is, like, it's real. It exists in the real world today, and it's something that I'm incredibly proud of as a Māori, to be able to share those kinds of things. And that's why I just kind of go out and research. At the moment, I'm researching the pūrākau o ngā punga, like, all insects come from the panga, you know, and there are lessons to be learned in those stories, but to breathe life back into them is the most important thing. That's the most important thing in 2021, to be able to breathe life into these stories. And that's, you know, is really, really important. And that is connected to ngā rākau or Aotearoa, the trees of New Zealand. But when we're talking about tree protection in particular, about 2 months ago, there was a bishop afera, like a bishop tree in Auckland that was cut down. There are only 4 of them. Bishop afera are what tangata Pacifica make their tapa cloth out of. Oh, wow. So, you know, so like it's special. These living and breathing rākau trees, they're special. They represent a big part of not just my culture, but all cultures. And that deserves some kind of protection, like government formulated protection. So trees where there's only 4 of them left in New Zealand, it doesn't matter where they are, that is considered And before you build a house, you ask yourself, well, can the developer afford to save this tree? And yeah, sure, it takes a couple of $100,000 off his bottom line, but what is that in 2021 to these developers who are multi-millionaires? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. There seems to be, well, actually, bro, before we move on from that, is that tree native to Aotearoa, or was it brought over here with our Pacifica whānau?
Aye. So it was built, like this one was quite old. It would have been brought over here not long ago, you know, like 100 years ago or something like that. You know, and so heaps of our arguments surrounding that. And this is something, so Mataharihari there is a protest going on there in Auckland at the moment, and it's surrounding a tree that is 400 or 500 years old. That tree existed prior to Te Tiriti. It was a taonga to te ao Māori prior to Te Tiriti. Te Tiriti means that we get to govern over our taonga, and iwi have no right over these things. Do you know what I mean? So there's just so many different issues connected to the tree protection movement, not to mention the climate change things, but all of this should be considered. The climate effects are definitely a big thing to consider, 100%. But mātauranga Māori, like Te Tiriti, all of these things should also be considered when we're dealing with these trees that predate European civilization here.
That's a big thing that's standing out for me, bro, throughout our kōrero, is that, I mean, obviously we'll probably get there and perhaps talk to that in terms of the environmental impacts of things, but it's definitely our connection to te tai ao and stuff like that. It's hard to quantify. Well, actually, is it hard to quantify? Because it sounds like there's a lot of studies or research to support, from how you're speaking anyway, that, you know, our connection to nature and things like that is, there's evidence that, you know, undeniably proves that our mental well-being and health is, you know, it correlates to our time.
That's 100%. That's 100% true. That's 100% true. And, you know, in these spaces, we should have a voice. I mean, in all spaces, te ao Māori should have a voice, but, you know, in these spaces in particular, where we're dealing with these things that are so close to our knowledge base, the things that we're trying to restore, everybody knows that there are problems within the communities, like within tangata whenua communities in New Zealand. And these are we have to be the ones who uplift us out of that place. And these pūrākau, they help uplift me out of poverty. So I know they must be able to do that to other people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what draws me to these kaupapas so much, is like, not only the fact that they're rāhui on these places and all of that, but it's just like, man, not everybody is fighting for these things that help change my life. So I better, you know, and that's ngā rākau and pūrākau all put together, you know.
A big game changer for me, bro, in terms of my own life's journey and my sort of self-development, was the realization of pūrākau not just being stories. You know, and you've spoken about it. I remember the story of creation, right? You've mentioned Tāne, and Ranginuia and Papatūānuku and those sort of things. I remember it being an absolute game changer. So I went to a private school, Catholic school. I was one of 5 Māori there at the time out of, you know, X thousand students. So I was learning about, and I'd come straight from Kura Kaupapa. So I'd gone from straight to Kura Kaupapa into this pretty different environment, bro. And they were talking about Big Bang Theory. And they were talking about how, you know, there was, you know, spontaneous combustion, there was darkness, and then all of a sudden there was life. And I was like, fuck, I've heard this before. Like, and then that's when I clicked, you know, there was Rangi and Papa, and then Tāne's actions exploded light into the world. And I was like, this is old. Like, you know, they're talking about like, this is some genius thing that they've designed or discovered or theorized or researched. And I'm like, nah, gee, we've known that for a long time.
100%. 100%. You know, like, I could go on and on and on about these pūrākau that are like that. And, you know, like...
Bro, give us another one. Give us one that you know of that's special to you.
So, bro, the tāmoko on my back is the pūrākau of the yellow flowering pohutakawa, a tree that specifically comes from Motiti Island. And the pūrākau, as I was told it, is Tangaroa and Tane Mahuta, you know, they were kind of like, they're brothers, but they're like a little bit enemies, and they kept kind of like messing with each other. And one day, Tane decided to swim down into Tangaroa's marae that was under the ocean, and he stole the jewel from within Tangaroa's marae. And he took that jewel and he placed it in the rākau that is now Pōhutukawa. And there is an old whakatauki, you know, when the Pōhutukawa blooms, the kina will be fat.
Mm.
That is just telling us the connection between nature, like between whenua and Tangaroa. The Pōhutukawa blooms, and the yellow flowering Pōhutukawa always blooms first. It blooms before the red flowering Pōhutukawa. And it does tell us, like, yo, if it blooms early, it will be a hot summer, you know, and all Pōhutukawa grow along the coastlines. They're connected. They reach down into the ocean and they steal the jewel. The jewel of Tangaroa is ngā kai, you know, kai moana. It's telling you that when they bloom, the ocean is ready. These simple connections, you know, everyone's like, oh, that's a myth and a legend. Carl, it is an easy way for me to pass a kōrero on intergenerationally, so people understand that when you see you don't go picking the kina all year round, but when you see it flower, now is the time. The kina are fat, you know, there's this balance to it. All of this is just so beautiful to me, and it's beautiful to other Māori too, and it's also beautiful to tangata tiriti, like to our Pākehā whānau. Anyone who comes here and hears these things cannot not be inspired by it. And like, it's like, that's why, brother, for me to be able to be on a podcast like this and breathe life into some of this kōrero is so important to me, because I know that there's like young people out there who believe in this.
Yeah, 100%. And even, but like, that's the thing too. Like, I know there's a lot of people like me who, you know, we love our taia, we love our whenua, but they're not on the ground with you in Auckland. So obviously there are certain, and perhaps they're self-perceived, because, you know, if we believe in the fight, then just fight, you know. I feel like that sometimes, but I myself, I feel like I can't speak to a kaupapa if I don't have an understanding of the lay of the land, of what's actually happening on the ground level. And that's why it was so important for me to have a kōrero with you.
And you know, like, so Brian, it is ngā rākau is a very, very weird space for people to be in, especially for me. I'm an arborist. I love trees. I also love kaupapa Māori, tikanga Māori. So, you know, there are trees within Auckland where I haven't supported them remaining because they go against the wairua or the will of what mana whenua want. So you do have to be balanced in these spaces. You have to understand that when there's cultural restoration going on, sometimes ngā rākau have to go. You know, not all rākau are the same in that way. But for us to have no framework that dictates when it's right and when it's not, it's just not the way for us to do things, because we're stealing away from our people's taonga here, you know?
I was going to ask that. What makes the difference between a rākau that is a taonga and a rākau that is not? How would you kind of speak? Well, actually, let me propose an idea, bro, because it is a weird question. My thoughts now from our conversation, because I came into this kōrero wanting to know the answer to that question, and I had no idea. But what I've gained so far from our kōrero, and let me know if I'm right or wrong, it's like, you know, it's an open discussion. All rākau are taonga, but it is that mana whenua, I guess, the ambition or what they're wanting in their area, which defines which taonga are going to be the taonga to kind of make that sacrifice and become whare to look after tangata, because that in itself is the mahi of a taonga. And then the other taonga are to stand and still tell those stories. Is there some sort of relativity there? What are your whakaara?
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, like, we have to understand that, you know, through colonization, a lot of bad things happen, and some living taonga or rākau representations to mana whenua of that colonization. And therein, like, if that is the way that mana whenua feel, then who am I to stand in the way of them cutting those trees down? However, you know, Trees don't have to be amazingly spectacular for them to be like really special. There can be a really young tree planted by, let's say, Nelson Mandela, and instantly that tree is very special, becomes a living monument to Nelson Mandela. And there are tons of trees like that in Aotearoa. You know, in Tāmaki Makaurau, there is an amazing grove of trees, Te Uru o Tapu. It's a grove of Pahutakawa. They're old, but they're not spectacularly old, but they used to be used for like burial process. They would hang the bodies in these Pahutakawa. And these spots are quite common across New Zealand. And, you know, as you go past Takapuna, you would be able to see all these hanging bodies, like waiting for burial in these Pahutakawa. Those trees are a living part of that iwi. You know, it hung the bones of their people in it. So those trees are a taonga forever, you know, but then there are other trees that just do not have their specialness. But for us to not be going about and ensuring that we have found those taonga and deem them safe forever, it's like not fulfilling our obligations as being kind of good kaitiaki, you know, which is what it's what my tupuna wanted me to be, brother. When I was locked up after, you know, the events of Canal Road when I got arrested, but I could feel my tupuna's arms around me, you know, like being locked in a cell isn't the nicest thing. But on that day, I knew I'd done the right thing. And that's something that I just want for people. I want people to have this feeling inside them that, yeah, you're being a good kaitiaki, you're looking after this place for other generations, because that was the will of my tupuna, you know? That's what I feel inside my wairua, brother.
Yeah. And there's a big thing, right? Like I feel like part of that, well, actually, this is what I relate to and what you're saying there, because, you know, it sounded like, if I understand correctly, you're just saying you want people to understand what their tupuna wanted for them, in a matter of speaking. I want people to understand they have value. And a lot of our people, especially you mentioned colonization, we're walking around lost or feeling like they have no value because the system has been put in place to tell them that they don't belong and that they have no value. And then doing this mahi and coming into these spaces, or not even just rākau mahi, but any sort of mahi that is going to hāpai us as mana whenua and things like that, that adds to that wairua and it helps them be found instead of remaining lost, right?
That's 100% it, brother. That there is the key to it. It's the, you know, that's what my tupuna wanted for me. But discovering that space for yourself is really important for everybody to just understand exactly like you say, by giving value to these pūrākau, pakiwaitara, that it adds value to me as a Māori in this country. And that is something that has been undermined since colonization, is the value of what it means to be Māori in Aotearoa.
Hard out, bro. So talk to me, like, obviously what you can. I can understand if it's a work in progress and there's still stuff that you haven't worked out yet. And there might be some stuff you're unwilling to share because it would be something that I dare say certain people would want to appropriate. Can you tell us a little bit about the framework that you're putting together, or that you know of in terms of our trees, or is it something you're not even started yet? It's just, you know, something that needs to be done.
No, it is definitely something that needs to be done, but because of how multifaceted it is, it can't just be constructed by arborists. This has to be like overseen by mana whenua. It has to of different areas, architects, all different, arborists, obviously, all different types of people. But the thing is, we used to have a framework that existed in 2012. And up until 2012, every single tree that I've spoken about had a protection order over it. And then 2012 came along and the national government came along and they just like abolished those tree protections when they adjusted the RMA in the way that they did. So it's not too big of a stretch to actually just kind of go back to that model, but slightly adapted. That's not a big ask, and those slight adaptations would definitely have to be the inclusion of mana whenua rights and all of those, you know, at least their kōrero on those things. But there is a framework that has existed, and there are also different countries around the world, that most of them actually, that have these kinds of tree protection programs or frameworks already in existence, and we can model ours around that. People always talk about high density housing. Well, look at somewhere like Singapore, where that is the garden city. And if you've ever been there, like, you can't see the buildings because of the trees everywhere. And they just have found a way to do high density housing. And I'm not saying like, let's build like Singapore, not at all. But what I am saying is they understand how to build and keep ngā rākau. And that's something that we should be doing. Our laws just can't keep empowering developers to do whatever they want, you know, and that's what they do. And having no legal framework, it actually opens my industry as an arborist up to these kind of like predator companies who are willing to just cut down with whatever, with no ethics at all, undercutting the industry and not following health and safety regulations. And none of that existed before 2012. In 2012, you couldn't touch a tree unless you had the right level of qualifications. And to have gone from 2012 to where we are now, in that short period of time, 1/3 of Auckland trees have been removed. That is just, you know, so how long is it going to be before another third is gone? It's just happening at such a rapid rate that this legislation needs to happen real quickly.
Man, that's fucked. Sorry, bro, but I don't know what else to say.
No, well, bro, like, and this is the thing. It's actually happening in, it'll be happening where you are too. There will be, in Taranaki, there will be trees that used to be protected that have been taken off, like the plan of protection. I know that in Matamata, they used to have 400 trees. It was reduced to 199 overnight when these changes to the RMA happened. And these are spectacular trees, you know, and no one got a say in it. You don't know who these trees were planted by, or whether they were planted by anyone we know at all, whether they predate these, you know, like European colonization or any type of planting records. But there will be trees in Taranaki that were incredibly meaningful and special that are probably not even there anymore because of that legislation change to the RMA. And that it happens all across Aotearoa. And just people just aren't aware of it. Like I say, if you killed a dolphin in the harbour, everybody would care. And kei te marama, I understand that, but these things are 700-year-old tree, also living, also taonga. We have to start. So that's what my job is to start to get people to understand that these things are living, they are valuable, you know.
What do politicians say when you get in front of them?
But it's this wicked finger pointing exercise, because councils point back to central government and they say, oh no, they need to change the RMA laws, and then central government points back to councils and they're like, oh no. So, and a lot of the real problem is, you know, with this housing crisis that's going on, it's build houses no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way. It's just not, it's like not visionary. You know, we should be building houses, but we can build houses and retain our taonga, especially in these areas that need it the most.
That's what Singapore does.
That's right. Or, you know, and like just thinking about the fact, like in Singapore, they have these special zones and where, you know, you can't cut trees down. In Māngere or Tāhahu should be a place like that. South Auckland should be a place like that. Until we can have kind of like parity with a place like Remuera, like the richer areas where they have 22% tree coverage and we only have 8%, we shouldn't be removing the trees in, like, there should be a minimum threshold of, let's say, 18% for all areas across Tāmaki Makaurau. Is that not the kind of city that we want to build? We want to build something where it's like there's still greenery. It's not like LA or New York where you fly in and you're like, whoa, there's no trees anywhere, you know?
Yeah, that's so ugly, bro. I remember that stood out to me immensely when I went to LA. 3 things: the big spaghetti highway, two, going up to the Hollywood sign and just looking out and seeing smog everywhere.
Yep.
And 3, homelessness.
Oh, bro, exactly the same. Exactly the same. Like, about those things stood out for me. And, like, this is the thing, like, living in Auckland my whole life, but I don't want to see, like, the homeless situation was pretty bad in Auckland as it is, but I don't want to see it, like, us just trending in that direction, you know? Um, I want to see us just build this beautiful city that people are lucky to live in, and that values all the things that trees represent.
New Zealand has this real danger, right, of becoming just like everywhere else. We've always been special. We've always, because we've held on to things that we're talking about today. But there's an obvious, I mean, yeah, like we're kind of on a precipice at the moment, at a crucial stage where we need to, and I guess I'm speaking here a lot to our tangata tiriti too, and even to those that are listening going, who gives a fuck about trees? Because I know you'll be out there, and kei a koe, that is your whakaro, but you got to understand that what keeps Aotearoa is our DIY fighting spirit.
Bro, 100%. And, like, bro, everyone needs to keep thinking that. What keeps Aotearoa? Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's what we should be, and especially our leaders, like our rangatira, need to keep thinking that, especially in these ways. That's why I'm so proud of some of the things that Te Pāti Māori have been doing recently, because they're really defining, like, the things that we were meant to get as part of Te Tiriti, and that is something that, like, that we're trying to head that in that direction, to supporting that whakaro of, like, honoring Te Tiriti. And so we need people to kind of, like, just buy into the fact that we can build New Zealand to be the way that we want it to be, not just in the likeness of another country, And
I think, like, speaking of Te Pāti Māori, bro, they've got that tagline of being unapologetically Māori, but it's not just a tagline. They're obviously living it. They're calling out a lot of those things that have been normal, social norms, socially acceptable in the House of Representatives, which then trickles down to the rest of Aotearoa. They're calling out the bullshit. And we're seeing, I've had a couple other guests on this week, and we've talked about this renaissance that's happening with Te Ao Māori. It's rediscovering, not rediscovering its value, because we've always known it's there. The other side are waking up a little bit to the value that we have, and associating the ability that Te Ao Māori and Mātauranga Māori has to get us out of the shit that we're in at the moment. And by shit, I mean homelessness, lack of housing, mental 100%. Health, all this sort of stuff. Te Ao Māori can help with, because it's all about, community and connection to Tai Ao.
By 100%, like, I cast my mind to Pūtiki at the moment, and the rāhui that they have there, and what they are trying to protect and uphold. And then, when I think back to what happened at Canal Road that day, where there were, like, nearly 100 police officers sent to move against us, there was a rāhui there too. And I know that for, like, tangata whenua, when you're put in a position to move against the rāhui, like, you don't want to be doing that, and these Māori police don't even have the ability to kind of have a choice in that space. And, like, I want to feel like the police uphold these things. That's a big part of New Zealand, don't make them move against these places where there is a rāhui on that place, and that's, like, that goes against tikanga Māori. Tikanga Māori should be upheld with the reverence of, like, religion, even more so in this country, like, as law. And I don't want there to be a repeat of what happened at Canal Road at a place like Pūtiki, especially not just for the Kaitiaki, but for the Pirihimana as well, because I don't like it when Māori police are made the face of moving against Māori issues. It's always the same thing, and trying to let people know that, that shouldn't be the way that New Zealand does things. If mana whenua have come out and said that there's the rāhui here, that this is sacred, then oh, I'm sorry, guys, but this is a sacred cause. Government needs to intervene in those ways and not send, especially police officers who don't believe in going to that place. That's just not the one.
I was going to ask about that, bro, because it's quite apparent in a lot of the media. I've seen the footage. I've seen that obviously you're passionate and you're heated in the moment of fighting. You know, and I don't mean like fighting. I mean like, you know, fighting and trying to get these people to wake up. But you're especially passionate and heated when Māori police are there. And I wanted to ask where that come from. But I mean, you've answered that there. It comes because, you know, they're being put in a position that they shouldn't have to be in, and they're almost getting pawned to kind of like this.
Brother, it's age old, you know, and this is the thing, you know, when you look at somewhere like Ihumātao and what happened there, the front line, bro, with that, what did they just dig up every tangata whenua Māori officer from Wellington, because that was what it was like in the first few days, everyone there, and they made sure that they had their tāmoko and all the photos, and you know, it was Māori against Māori, and I don't like that. You know, when my arm was broken when I went over the fence by security, and heaps of people have been like, oh, why don't you prosecute that security for him? Carl, that is age old. It's the same old thing. It's like these impoverished brown people that are being made to work for people who have the money to put them in this position where they're breaking my arm. Bro, I'm a victim, but bro, they're the weapon. They're not the person who was wielding that. You know, so no, I'm not going to go against them because this is age old. Using Māori in this way to stand against whenua issues is really important to the cause of pirihimana. And I know, but there were people on that day who were swearing, just being belligerent. But what I said hurt feelings. And that's why I'm getting done for disorderly conduct. Not to mention the fact that I am Māori, and to some of these pirihimana who were there, like, you know, that's dangerous for them to hear that type of stuff, because some of them actually believe in it. Some of them that I was saying, like, you know, you might have seen one of the videos where I'll go, bro, you look hard, but your eyes look soft. This is getting through to you. I understand that, because I want police to eventually be able to just stand there and say, hey, look, is there a rāhui here? I don't want police to just be used in the same way that they have been used forever. I have the right to not move against the rāhui. It's really important in this country that we don't just continue on these same age-old things that have been happening through colonization. So don't keep using police to steal whenua. You know, I know Canal Road, people think that was privately owned, and it was a private, but there were things in the works that were going to transfer ownership of that so we could keep those taonga for the tamariki of Avondale. And, you know, it was the police that stopped that from happening. Police working for developers to take whenua away from a community that really, really wanted that. That's something that's really familiar in New Zealand, too familiar. And sometimes it's going to be the right time, but when there's rāhui and mana whenua are in support of the kaupapa, then the police need to not be that way. And I look to Pūtiki and I pray that they will be treated like the people who went over the bridge and not the people who went over the fence at Canal Road. That's what I hope for. I hope that mana whenua from within Pūtiki get to actually implement that mana over that whenua, you know, and they don't have police stand in the way of that. So yeah, like it really, really hurts my feelings, or just hits me when I see these people standing against these things that they don't believe in, you know, especially when I can say to myself, standing up for what you believe in feels so good. I can only imagine what the opposite of that feeling feels like. It probably feels really shit, you know?
It's almost like, do you have any siblings, bro?
Are
you an older brother?
Carl,
are you the youngest?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can probably still empathize with this too, because I come from that space too. I have an older brother, and I see the frustration that he has with me when he sees me doing things that he knows aren't good, and he just knows that they're not good because he's done it before, but he can't communicate to me why it's not good. And sometimes I just need to listen to him and trust him. that's similar to what you're speaking about, right? Like there's that frustration because you're seeing your whānau do things that you know aren't good for their wairua, and you're almost just saying, look, just trust me, come with me, this is the better way to do things, but they're not listening, and that hits you a little bit more, that hurts a bit more.
And you know, like what I really actually, but like the only time I can actually remember what the officer who sung at Ihu Mākau, right, that's what we need. I'm not saying leave the police force. We are always going to have a police force. Be an influence of change within the police force that is supportive of these efforts. I tautoko you being a police officer, you know, but brother, I can tell you this. I went over the fence, and when I went over the fence, security grabbed me, and there was one of the security, he actually held my head. And I was so lucky that it was him who held my head. And he was like, oh, you're a savage, bro. Why did you go away? Why are you doing this? But at that time, a bunch of other security, like one had my arm behind my back and broke my wrist, and the others were just stomping on me. And I was screaming out for help. And a female police officer turned and looked at me. And the most vivid memory is the look in her eye before she turned away, because she was scared for me and I was scared. And as a police officer, no one signs up to be put in a position where they look at someone who's scared and they can't help. She turned away. So that memory that will live with me will live with her. And I just have to think that, you know, maybe she's a really good police officer who won't just last there. So she won't be that influence of change. And that's all that I hope for my tangata whenua members of the police force, is that they can help the police force kind of change a little bit and not be so kind of like racist in that way. And, you know, think about these ways that they're moving against tangata whenua at the moment, whether it be Putiki or Canal Road or whatever, you know?
It's like a story, bro. Since we're on the topic of pūrākau, there's a story that comes down from Whanganui Riverways, and it's in regards to a taniwha called Tūtai Poroporo. Have you heard of that story before?
Oh, but I'd love to, yeah.
So in a nutshell, I'm not going to say it fully because I don't understand it fully, and I don't want to disrespect our whānau from down there by saying it wrong. And it's one of those pūrākau that's got like 8 different versions depending which kōrero you ask.
All of them, yeah.
I like that how you said before the version that I was told, because that's
because you know.
We always have to put that disclaimer in before we tell any of these stories, because someone's going to hear it and go, that's not right.
That's not the story.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you know, tell me your story then, because I want to know more. You know?
You put it together, right? And then you get your story that you pass on. So there's this there was a rangatira from down Rangitike ways, and his name was let's just call him. There was a rangatira down there because I forget his name and I don't want to get that part wrong because names are important. A rangatira from down there, from Whanganui Riverways, and he went down to Nelson on a fishing trip with some whānau and catch up with them. And on that fishing trip, he caught a shark. But then he realized that the shark was a little bit special. It wasn't your normal shark. So he kept it as a mokai, as a pet, and he fed it. And then he took it back to Whanganui with him. And he decided to name it Tūtai Poroporo. And what he fed it, and it grew and it got big, and it turned out to be a taniwha. So it was really good that he obviously didn't kill it when he killed it, and that he held on to it. Then what happened is this rangatira would come back every day. He kept them in the shallows of the river, and would come back every day, cut a keel with him, feed him until he got, pretty massive. One day the rangatira didn't come back, and he didn't come back because he had been in a fight, been in a war, and he got killed. So Tūtai Poroporo went looking for his master or his friend, went searched high and low, couldn't find him anywhere. And he kind of just knew innately within himself, because of their connection, that he had passed. But as he had that realization and thought, he caught a bit of wind, and he got the scent of his hoa. And so he followed that scent, and it led him to a spot in the Whanganui River where they had his remains in an umu, in an oven, because they had cooked him and eaten parts of him. And so he knew, okay, you fellas killed my master, I'm going to wreak havoc. So he spent time, days, months, maybe even years, going up and down the river. And every time they went in there, like a hunting party or fishing party jumped in the water, they would disappear and they would be gone. And people were thinking, what's going on? Eventually, they call out to put the word out, hey, we need a taniwha slayer. Is anybody out there able to help? They get a taniwha slayer down from Kaiui, whose name is Te Aokihu. And what they do is they, long story short, they design a box, they carve out a box, they put Te Aokihu inside, and they float him down the river. Tūtai Poroporo gets the scent of this, smells the human, thinks the human is behind the log or behind the box, and goes to eat the whole log, not realizing that he swallowed Te Aokihu. Te Aokihu slides the lid off the box and cuts himself out from the inside, and that's how he slays the taniwha. There's more to that story, obviously, because he later finds out why the taniwha was doing what he was doing, and then realized that he was actually in the wrong, and then he goes about making amends. But the reason why this pūrākau comes to mind, bro, is that you're almost saying or hoping that some of our tangata whenua who go into the police force, they can be the te aokihu within that taniwha. They can help,
100%.
help slay it from the inside. So and man, I really hope that that police woman who saw you on the ground, bro, I hope she's okay. Because if she's living with that image, man, that would be so hard.
You know, and by, you know, because there was a Aukati Rahui on that site. And, you know, by I wouldn't go against it. Rahui means more to me than the laws of this land, obviously. Yeah. But you know, that is a burden that lives with her for going against that Aukati, that Rahui. That's what I believe. That's a, you know, I can't be proven right there, but you know, I'd hate to live with that. What I have to live with is going into the cells that day and like this warm feeling of feeling that I'd done the right thing. Now I can only imagine that she went home that day and had a cold feeling of doing the wrong thing. And I'm from the south side. What, you think I've never done the wrong thing in my life? I've done plenty of wrong things, and I know what feels better. I know what feels where, you know, I roto I taku wairua, inside my spirit, I know what feels better. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just kind of like live up to that, you know. And I want people inside the police force to be able to do that too. There were conversations that we had, because it was funny, some of the police officers that I had been like right in the face of were the people who drove me to the cells that day. And, you know, I said to them, but I know I went hard on you, all of that stuff. But they said to me, they're like, we had no idea that there was a rahui, or we didn't really know what we were getting into. We didn't know any of that stuff. That's wrong. That's wrong. You should at least let people know. You know, you should at least let people know. That's just like the simplest change, that you should at least let the tangata, like everyone know, hey, look, you know, there's a rahui, and people should understand what that is before you move against it, you know?
Is there a responsibility of those people to be connected to be able to receive that message too? Like, you know, should they be sort of involved in that community to understand that, or to be aware, or to be in the social spaces that provide that information? Like, hey, there's a rahui here?
Well, so the thing is, you know, like during this time, you know, we were at, before they came, it was ages that we've been at Canal Road, like 250 odd days. And during that process, bro, we had many hui with the police, the kind of kōrero about everything. And they knew full well what would happen if they came. They knew that they would meet that kind of resistance, and they were trying to avoid that. And every kōrero that they had, they were trying to avoid that. And they were well aware of the fact mana whenua had placed a rahui on that place. So, you know, like they were well informed. We were working to come to a resolution that wasn't the way that it was that day. And I can only imagine. I see what they're doing at Pūtiki every day. That, you know, and they're appealing to David Parker and we were doing that same thing every day. I'll put a video out trying to get Phil Goff to come down to site. And none of them would listen. They just don't show face in that space. But what happens is eventually they just send 200 police officers to move against you. Like, they're not doing the bidding of Jacinda Ardern and David Parker. That's who's sending them your way, Pūtiki. So I want people to know that that's what happens. You know, it's just like I say, no one deserves to be treated like the everybody who was involved with what happened at Canal Road will live with that for ages. We want to be treated like the people who went over that bridge were treated. That's all we want. And I want the people at Pūtiki to be treated with that same kind of respect too. Activism or action, peaceful action especially, has shaped this country tremendously. So we should be more sensitive to when these things are happening. You know, our activism has shaped us positively since the inception of Aotearoa's government. So why aren't we listening more carefully to when these people are right and not just sending people like me into the system, you know?
So for those listening, bro, because we've spoken about it a lot and I just kind of clicked, I should have got you to do this before, but I've just clicked that perhaps we need to, just to add context to a lot of our kōrero, especially for our tangata tiriti that are listening, but I know there are a lot of Māori listening too who probably don't know due to, you know, not, you know, being disconnected. I hate that word, but I can't think of another one right now. What is a rāhui, and how did these come to be in place at the places that you've spoken about?
Okay, so at Canal Road in particular, we had a kaumātua who had come down, and you know, at this time the occupation had already begun, and we took him for a tour of Canal Road. And like I say, at that time there were like 46 amazing, incredibly rare rākau, so trees on that property. And as we went through those 46, we were all able to share how rare they were, the pūrākau and instantly he was like, yep, nah, this is a special place. It's incredibly special when you talk about the mātauranga that it represents and how important these trees are to Auckland. And he placed a rāhui aukati on it. And most times if there's a rāhui, you can't go on to that whenua. But in this instance, an aukati was only Kaitiaki could go on there. If you came with the intention to protect and preserve the rākau on that site, then you were allowed to be on the site. But if you came with the intention of doing any harm, then my understanding, you would be going against the aukati, and that can, like, you know, have wicked ramifications, and not just on you. In Te Ao Māori, my understanding of makatua is it doesn't just always fall upon you, you know? And to be honest, I don't even like to think about those realms. They kind of like, they scare me a little bit.
Getting goosebumps when you the makatu bomb. Just
yeah. So you know, when you talk about those things, especially for me, and you know, but there are so many people who have a deeper understanding than me of that stuff that actually work for the police force, that when I put them in that position, they would get the heebie-jeebies too. They wouldn't want to be in that position. But it's not just by tapu rings out across tangata ole moana, across tangata whenua. We all know what that is, you know, and none of us want to go against the wishes of our ancestors in that way, you know. So, but there was huge reverence for the aukati at Canal Road. You know, there's taonga laying on the ground there, even still, the wood of these rākau, but nothing has been taken, and it hasn't been taken because of the aukati. We just can't do that. When it's lifted, maybe, but these things should be listened to. There's been rāhui that have been put on in the Waitakere Ranges that have been supported by the council, and then people aren't to walk through there because of the Cody dieback and all of these types of things. So I don't think that rāhui should be something that the government to get to pick and choose when they adhere to. If mana whenua put a rāhui on over land that they have mana over, then you have to respect that. You have to respect that. And mostly the police have to respect that, or give the option to their people who want to respect it to be able to, you know.
And I'm glad that you circle back to the police, bro, because I did want to ask, I think it's important for people to realize that, you know, we said before, you can still be a police officer and you can still maintain your mana as a person, your mana as a kaitaki, your mana as a tangata whenua. You can still do both. And I think it's a tool of colonization to think that you are your occupation, right?
Aye.
To try and make people think you're a cop, so that's all you are. You're just a cop, so you have to do this. You're just an arborist, so you know, just climb and cut your trees, boy, and shut up and sit down, sort of thingy. You know, you're just a, you know, wannabe podcaster, media dude. You don't even live in the area. Get out. These like things, a lot of it, yes, whānau, it can be imposter syndrome, but a lot of it as well, it's systematic messages that have been repeated and planted, you know, mai rā anō, since those first ships turned up. So I think it's important to actually make mention aloud that you are not your occupation. You are not defined by your job. You are a person first.
100%. You know, and whatever you are, you have an influence. Like you have an influence over that space. Like I've been an arborist. Like I've been an arborist since I was 16 years old. It took me off the streets of South Auckland, and I'm glad to say I've brought some of that to arboriculture. I haven't left South Auckland behind. I took that with me. I've taken Te Ao Māori with me and been able to insert that into arboriculture. You should be able to try and like influence change by the good things about that are within you in that space. So, you know, it's incredibly important that we have tangata whenua police. It's incredibly important. But what's more important to that is that they feel safe to be proper police, that they're able to shape what we know is a racist institution into not being such a racist institution by their involvement, you know. And so, you know, open up those spaces for Māori to lead in those ways, you know. I really hope that that happens, because when they go to Pūtiki, when that happens, you know, we'll be resisting in the same way. And I hope that there's not another woman police officer who has to turn around while someone from there is being beaten. You know, turning a blind eye to that is just not what you sign up to be a police officer for.
So fast forward, bro, to the court scenario. Obviously, I understand there's probably stuff that you can and can't talk about. What's happening there at the moment? What's the latest? What can people do to help?
So, you know, we're all facing court in July 16th. We've all got to show up to court. There's 3 of us left, although 10 of us were arrested on the day. 7 people basically had their charges withdrawn. 3 of us remain. And we all have to show up on July 16th. And, you know, I've been denied. I've got 2 convictions. I have a disorderly and I have a trespass. The other 2 have trespasses on them. And some of it doesn't make sense. I mean, one of them who's been trespassed didn't even make it into the tree, onto the land. The female, Hannah, if you watch some of her videos, and I'd ask everyone goes out and watches them, her live streams, you see them trying to cut down the tree that she's hanging from. You know, her life was put in danger.
Where do we find them? We're just going to make it
on Hannah Lupa's Facebook page or on Save Canal Road Facebook page, and there's some of them on Instagram as well. But you can see, like, I mean, I couldn't watch all of it because she's a close friend of mine, and you can see that she's scared for her life that day. I had my wrist broken that day. I'm taking 2 charges. I've hardly been able to walk since that day, like for more than 20 minutes. And all I'm saying is that we've been punished enough in that way. We're asking that people like write support letters for our discharge without conviction. But one of the big reasons I'm asking that is because when I was like 18 going 19, I actually got some serious drug offenses put against me. And but like, bro, I was living in a totally different life then. Like I was homeless at 14. I was in the system beyond then. And at 19, I was basically living in a drug house where I got drug convictions put against me. Fast forward 20 years later, those have all been wiped. And if I get this disorderly conduct charge put back on my record, then all of this history these historic charges go back on my record as well. That will mean that I can, and I'm like, yo, look, I'm speaking to it. I know that they've been clean slated. That is not, the person I was is the same person, but I'm not living in that world anymore. And if those charges go back on my record for me defending, well, I'll live with it, but it would be incredibly detrimental to mean the loss of my employment as a lecturer, where I get to train and teach kids from South Auckland, this mātauranga Māori that we've spoken about, i tēnei rā. You know, it would jeopardize my future employment if I try to go anywhere else. If I started my own business, trying to get a discharge without conviction here is really important. And I know some people probably think, oh, well, those charges probably deserve to be on you. Cool, think what you want. I'm proud of the person I am today, and I'd hate for those charges to affect me in the future because I'm not living that life. The other people who are facing these charges are in a very similar position, but not with the same types of charges or anything like that. So it's really important that, you know, we were defending things that were living and really important to Aotearoa. So if we can get support letters from people to say, hey, these guys do not deserve convictions for this. And for some of them, they have already served enough punishment, that would be so beneficial to our court case. And I said this on the day of our last court case, even if it's not, it's so meaningful to me. It means the world to me when I hear people who like tautoko the kaupapa, because it's like, oh, okay, I didn't just take this because this is just some whakaaro that's in my mind and nobody else's. You know, so like I really like to, like, if the judge doesn't read any of them, I couldn't care less. I read every single one of them, and some of them bring tears to my eyes. So like, we're just asking for these letters of support for these Kaitiaki that were involved in this, you know.
And whānau, I can definitely vouch for the latter to that the bro spoke to. Having been involved in advocacy work and lobbying stuff, the letters of support that you get during this time, it really does let you know that you're on the right path, because you do have those moments where you're like, fuck, is this all worth it? Well, I did. I can't speak for the bro, but I know that I did. Even though, yes, I know big picture, macro, of course it's worth it. But I did have weak moments where I was like, fuck, is this worth it? Is it worth, you know, losing my partner? Is it worth me being away from whānau? Is it worth me potentially losing my job? I've gone through that, bro. And I know that having those conversations, and it's almost like, I have to admit, I'm going to put this out there, and I'm not having to dig at anyone, but almost when people come up to me in the street, they're like, man, I love what you're doing. I'm like, well, fuck, why aren't you doing it with me? Like,
yeah, 100%.
At the same time, I respect that that's not everyone's place, that's not everyone's buzz, and that's not within everyone to do. And if they have to channel that need, that want, and that ambition through me, then so be it. And a way that you can do it is by writing these letters. So definitely, whānau, if you can, well, not if you can, I know you can. The next moment you're available, even if it's a sentence, just fire them through. We'll list the email and we'll list all the socials and stuff like that for you to get hold of the bro Zane, and also all his whanaunga that are going through this whawhai with him. But before I let you rock and roll, is a question that I ask every guest that comes on the podcast. Bearing in mind you're not a mental health professional, but obviously you've been through a few wars, my bro. Even, you know, before we talked about ngā rākau and everything we're doing, you know, you mentioned that you had been homeless, you know, and you've had, you know, things put on your record, etc. There's someone listening to this right now who is feeling a bit down and out. They're in a bit of a hard place, and they might be perhaps thinking that there's no getting out of it. What would your invitation, advice, or message be to those people that are listening and they're in that space at the moment?
Get busy. So, and this has been the way it's been with me since I was real. Like, I've always dealt with mental health issues, still do. But the biggest thing for me is like finding arboriculture and finding a mahi was so important to me. Having my hands be busy and my mind like work and climbing, it actually takes my mind off the stress of the world. So it's just like, man, if you have to, I learned something in the weekend, you know, kōrero o raru ki te moana. So kōrero your problems to water. And it spoke to me instantly because I love the ocean. You know, I can do the same thing to ngā rākau too, but just get out and get busy. Start doing stuff, man. Because like eventually your mind leaves that place. It always comes back. You will always come back to these dark times, but just get busy, man. Get busy and start trying to do positive things. By all those hard times, all of the, like when I was sleeping in the tree every night, for nights on end, there were definitely nights that I questioned and was stuck in I'd listen to podcasts, I'd read books just to take my mind away from that thought just for a second. Because that relief can be just so beneficial to you sometimes. So just don't dwell on those things, man. Get busy, read something, do something. You know, it's not going to go away.
Awesome, bro. Where can people find you? How do we write those letters to you? What Facebook pages, Instagrams, whatever do we need to follow to be kept in the loop? Is there a newsletter we can sign up for?
So bro, there is saveourtrees.nz, which is an awesome website to just follow our kaupapa. It basically puts out anything like this. All our media that we do will be found through there. Save Canal Road Trees on Facebook and on Instagram is really important. They keep you updated with any kaupapa relating to ngā rākau. There's also a mana rākau group page which people should sign up to if they hear this calling them the kaupapa of protecting ngā rākau. And then you can follow me on Instagram or on Facebook, just Zane Wedding or 420 Zane on Facebook. Gotta change that. But yeah. So yeah, like it's so meaningful for you to have me and just to get the word out on this. Thank you so much, brother.
Bro, look, you know, mai te kāhui maunga ki a koe e hoa, ngā mihi nui mo tō mahi, mo te hāpai i te ngahere o tātou rākau, ngā pū rākau hoki, mai rā anō me te mohi o hoki e hara rātou, e hara e nei pū rākau he kōrero noa, engari kei reira te mātauranga kia mohi ai tātou katoa, nohia tātou, kōwai tātou hoki e aramua ake. So not only, you know, thanking you, bro, for the mahi you're doing with the trees, but for looking after our stories that not only show us where we come from, but they guide us into who we can be and where we're going as well, bro. The mahi that you're doing cannot be understated. And yeah, I look forward to helping out in any way possible moving forward. I feel like we're going to be having a couple more kōrero, whether that be publicly like this or just, you know, in the DMs and figuring out things together. So I'm excited, bro. But yeah, I wish you all the best with your journey, because I know that this mahi can be very weighty. It's very heavy. And I was stoked to see you in the weekend dangling your feet in the water and getting back in touch with the bro Tangaroa, bro. And you know, me myself, my one that you can build up to is I like to grab a rock and walk out as far as I can and sit down actually submerged.
Wow.
And kind of just sit there and kind of almost meditate. Obviously, you have to do it in parts because you got to come up for air. Or if you're a bit smart like my dad, you can grab a snorkel and just sit there for ages. But that's one of my favorite things, bro, because it drowns out the noise of the world and you just...
Bro, those are the things that I'm just trying to talk about, you know what I mean? It's just like exactly that, just calming that mind a little bit. So, yeah, because it can be busy. So,
Aroha nui, bro, and we'll speak again soon.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much. Ka kite.